Hello guys, and today is not a Whipsnade Zoo recreation video. I've actually got a lot of love for the pools and things that I've been creating, and a couple of people asking how exactly I've done the style of pool that you see in these clips here with the actual lined pools, as opposed to just doing pools with terrain and not lining them. So I thought what I would do is just a fairly simple and quite quick tutorial video on how I do them, because they're not too complicated, but they can be a bit daunting to start with, and I think once you kind of get the technique of doing them, they're actually not too bad, and I think they do add a quite nice realism to the zoo depending on what style you're going for. And yeah, I think if people are interested in how to do them, then why not do a little video and show people how to use them. So yeah, we would do a bit of talk about different styles of the pools, different techniques to do them, and I will try and do a mixture of real time stuff and maybe a bit of time-lapse stuff, which I've not done before, but I think it'll probably save a bit of any boring elements coming through taking too long. So here we go. Okay guys, here we go. So the first thing you'll probably want to do is just test your terrain out and make sure that you have got your water level where you want it to be. So if you kind of roughly draw out your pool, so in this we're going to do a fairly basic like kidney shape, just because that kind of gives you quite a good idea of the two different sort of sides. So in terms of this kind of curve here and that kind of curve there, this type is a bit more difficult. So if we kind of do a kidney shape, that means we can get both of the types in, and then we'll just sort of slightly smooth it out a bit, and then we'll put the water in and see what the level's like. So that level's pretty good for what we want. You could smooth it just a tiny bit more if you wanted, and then we will still edit terrain after at the end as well, once the actual lining is done, just to make sure everything lines up right. So if you smooth it just a tiny bit on that side, then and on that side, then we can go for putting the actual pool in. We'll just test the water again. So if you put the water in, then we'll get a plaster piece. So depending on how big the actual pond is that you want to do, it depends on what size you want the plaster to be. So this kind of shape is not massive, but it's not tiny, so that kind of shape might be the best one. So if we put it on the flat and then change it up to be like that, then we can just shift it around. So what we're going to do now is line the edges with our shape. So again, it doesn't have to be completely perfect, just because you are kind of getting the rough outline, and then at the end we'll touch everything up and make sure it's all looking how it's supposed to look. So we will do that all the way around so that we've got our outline shape. So I will do that in a time-lapse bit so that you don't have to watch me do the whole thing, but it's basically just copying, just using the X function, and going all the way along to line the pool. So just making sure everything is lined up like this. So yeah, we'll do that for the rest of it, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so that is all lined. So obviously there's little bits like this that we will sort out once it's all finished, but I've got the basic outline. There's not as much of the of that as I would like, so I might just quickly change that a little bit just so that that part there is also going in that direction. So maybe what we'll do is get them both, push them back in, and then make that one that way around a bit more. It's not going to line up now, but we might add another piece in. So yeah, this is the more tricky bit, which would be nicer to actually show. So we'll make that one like that as well, and then will be sorted. Takes a little bit. It depends what kind of vision you have for what you want, really, in terms of how much planning you do. If you just want a simple pool and you don't really have much of an idea of the shape that you want, then it's not too bad, because you can just do whatever you want, whereas if you've actually got a kind of more strict shape that you want, or it's fitting into a certain area, then obviously it's going to be a little bit more tricky to kind of make the bit that you want fit and make it all work. So yeah, that's a better shape. We've got a few panels there that we're going to need to do the trickier type of plastering on. So we will now take out the water. That's all sorted, so we're left with that. So you then need to decide what your actual edges and your angling you want. So obviously straight edges a bit more difficult, but if you want sloped edges, it's a bit easier in terms of the terrain around the outside. So you can do, if you flatten that again, we can decide on whether we want quite a shallow pool or a steep pool, and the actual base as well. So if you decide, I think I want it a certain, like quite a shallow pool, maybe halfway down this, then get your plaster piece again, make it horizontal. It depends, depending on the size, obviously it depends on which type of plaster, so maybe the bigger one would be better for this piece, just so that it covers a bit more area with less piece count. So that can go in, say, that sort of height. We know that the water level is fairly near the top, so if we said that sort of height, make sure that the whole of the base is covered by your plaster pieces. So it depends how big and how many pieces you'll need, but we will, yeah, this should be alright. So I don't know why that one is off. Move those across. So there we go, there's the lining, the base of it. So once you've got your base done, you can do the sides. So deciding what angle you want, the easiest way to do this is if you use the angle snap tool down the bottom there, because then you know that you're going to get exactly the same all the way around, but you don't have to worry about moving this over to each piece. You can do it individually for each piece but replicate it all the same. So if we say that we want maybe three for the angles towards the outside, then we can raise that up to the height that we want. So if we say we want a little lip like that, obviously you can do it right to the top if you want, or you can leave however much of a vertical bit that you'd like, but we'll say just a small one like that, and then pull that down so that it's covered by the top. Save it like that, and then move on to the next one. So do exactly the same, pull it out, 2 notches, and then pull it up to where it meets in this corner here. That is where you need everything to be lined up, and then you can pull it back down so that it's covered. So do that all the way around, and then you'll have your basic pool. So I will do that now on the time lapse. Okay, so that is all done. So you can see everything's all lined up at the top. We've got the odd bit of terrain poking out and stuff, but we will sort that out once we finish off the actual lining of the pool. So as you can see, like I said, all this sort of side is nice and easy, whereas this side, this is what you're left with. You're left with these horrible gaps. Okay, so now that we're left with these bits, what we want to do is cover these up. So it's a little bit more fiddly, but once it's done, it looks quite nice. So what you want to do, I'll show you in the middle one because it's the biggest gap we've got here. You want to copy one of these over. So we'll copy that one over. Just pull it out as far as you want. And then we'll copy this one over as well. And the point that you see here is where the 2 pieces there are going to meet in the middle. So what you then need to do is angle this piece so that it goes from that point to that point. So it's going to be a little bit fiddly, but if we kind of get the angle of that, we should be able to get it in quite well. And a little bit more so it just meets the bottom. It looks like the top's slightly out there. Pull it over a little bit more. And pull that bit over. There we go, that's pretty much right. Drag that bit down to meet the base, and then we can do the same for this piece. So this piece will be easier because we've already got the bottom angle done. So if you do the same again, meet the base, try and get the right angle there to meet the 2, and then they should get the angle just right. Should meet up perfectly, which that does look like it is. So drag that one down, and there we go. That is your join, your curved join for that kind of side, facing outwards. So if we repeat the same for those 2, then I will just do that quickly and then we'll move on. Okay, so that is all finished. So like I say, that one wasn't too hard because it was purely a a small section. You might have a bit of issues here, so you might have to, where you've got like 3 panels all on top, you might have to pull one of them ever so slightly out or push one of them back, whatever suits best, but yeah, it depends how visible it is. So that is the basic line pull. So now we move on to sorting the terrain. So as you can see, big gaps, everything like that. The steeper your edges of your pool, the harder it will be to cover this sort of bit up and make it look good, but we'll kind of do what we can to make it look good. So I normally just use the push and pull and just do it on a lower intensity and just try and raise it all up. So we could maybe flatten it first and see what we're left with just around the edges, and then we can edit from there. So it's once you know exactly what you're doing, it's not too bad. So it might be good to double check the water level as well. So yeah, that's good. That's exactly how we wanted it. Water level in there looks good. So we'll remove that and we'll continue doing this. So we know where the level is, so we need to try and make sure we're not doing anything that will change that up. So if we just slightly push stuff, push and pull to try and make things work. Now it depends how much you've dug in as well sometimes, as to how much you're going to have to play around with this. So here we will just keep going all the way around and do that. Okay, so it's all finished. As you can see at the end there, I'm having a little bit of trouble with some of the side bits, which will happen from time to time. It depends on your water level, how much gap you leave. So sometimes if you leave a bigger gap between the top and the water level, it might be easier to make the terrain work, but that is the basic way to do it. So there are a few different ways you can integrate this, especially taking care of the sides. So you can see you might have the odd bit where the water actually comes through, which obviously we don't want. There's a little one there as well. So that is completely dependent on you and what you want to do. So over here I've made a few examples of what you can do for the side. So you could use mulch along the side there to cover up any bits that you don't want to be seen. You could use rocks, or you could carry on the plaster out to the outside as well. So we could, for example, on this gap here, copy that one over, make it flat again and bring it up like that, with a lip or not with a lip, depending on what you want to be seen. So if we said we want it like that, and then pull it out to the side, you could do that. Something that looks like there's actually a rim that expands around the whole thing, and then you let your terrain sort of flow into it however you want it to do. Depends on how neat you want it, really. You could even copy that one up and put it like that and try and make it all more smooth, however you want it, really. You could use some plants to cover the sides. One of my favourites, the nettles, not in real life but in the game. You could just plonk some plants or that sort of thing in there to hide your bad patches. So if we sink that, that's a bit big, isn't it? If we sink that down, you might want something like that. Although obviously you need to make sure it doesn't clip into the water, unless you want things that are going to hang into the water, which I've done with that one. It's quite a good one for having on like the water's edge, I think. So yeah, you could just cover it with stuff like this to hide anything that you don't want. You could also use the mulch. So you could have things on the side like that. You can use mulch. So say on that side. It depends on the terrain and stuff that you've got around the edges as well. But you could just do something like that. Just to sort of make the make it blend in a bit more with the actual terrain that you've got. Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, it all depends on the look that you're going for, really. Or yeah, you could use the rocks. Something like these, which is what I did in my hippo house. I had rocks lining the pool, so I mean you could even have it covering the whole thing if you wanted, and that would cover some of those gaps quite well. Or you could have the more sort of flat rocks, maybe not one that big, but something like so. So it completely depends on what sort of look you're hoping for, really. There are a couple of other things that you can do, some like customization stuff depending on what you want, so changing the colour of the pool. Sometimes you don't want it crystal clear, that sort of thing, so if you take all the bases of the pools, did I have another one there, or is that all of them? That might be all of them. If you take the bases and you can then colour them, so some people do sort of a nice blue, that's a bit too much, something like that. You can also change the sides as well if you want to. It depends on whether you want them on the if you want them to be up to the water level or not, because that might make a difference. So you could, you can colour the pool if you want them to look more natural, maybe like a darker or browns or dark greys, that sort of thing. You could have them, if you want them really bright, have the whiter colours or the light greys, things like that. You could make them blue, you could make them green if you want them to look like they've got sort of algae and stuff in them, and you have water clearing constantly on, that sort of thing. So You can also put in lights, obviously, to any pools that you want, and then you can also do anything that your animals will need to get into the water itself. So that might be copying one of these over and making some steps or something out of it, or a ramp. Either way, whatever you wish, really. So I could maybe move that one up like so, but pull it out a bit, and then copy it over. To make a set of stairs, and see, it depends on what sort of animal you're having in here, and how deep your pool is to how many you'll need. So yeah, that should be the last one. And then if you want, you can copy all of these over. I love it when it lines up properly. Copy all them over like that, and then you've got a set of steps, or yeah, that could be a ramp, depending on what you want, what animal it is, what size, the depth, all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, that is pretty much everything to say about the basic types of pools. You can use, there's so many different ways to do things that it's kind of hard to say exactly what you should do, what you shouldn't do, but this is a kind of nice way to make a basic pool that I've found, and it's worked for me quite well, so hopefully you guys will find it useful as well, and be able to use this sort of style in some of your habitats. Obviously always check that the animals can use it, but they should be able to walk on the plaster as an actual base, so as long as they can get in properly, it should be okay, and even if the terrain itself is lower than the plaster, they should, as far as I know, be just walking on the plaster itself on the pool rather than sinking into the terrain. The other method you can use for, especially with paths, is this same method like this, but using a fake path, so using plaster as a path to go around and then having your actual path beyond it, because it's quite hard to get water and paths right next to each other. It just doesn't really work, especially unless you're using glass barriers, so you can use a glass barrier on one side. I did actually do a little one. I started playing around and then actually decided I really liked what I was doing, so but this is one I made. I haven't taken the water out to sort that bit of terrain, but this is a basic version of a kind of indoor terrain, modified, but all flat sort of thing. So you've got the glass along the front here, which is an actual barrier, and that goes down the side as well. So you can see that's literally a square of glass. I had to raise it right up to put the water in and then sink it back down to the level, and then I've just covered over all the bits that I don't want to be seen in plaster. So all the front, I've coloured it and everything, so it looks quite nice. Then obviously you can continue all your stuff, even though the glass is sunk into the ground, you can continue the plaster and null barriers and things if you wish. The inside is the same, so obviously I've sunken the terrain right down, put the fake sort of bottom in, and then this is the technique I've used for this side, so using the plaster to cover up any sides and then steps in the corner. So in theory the animal can walk down these steps. I don't know if they could use that, it might have to be a ramp, and it might have to be further out, but that is the kind of look that you can get from using this with vertical sides. It just means that the issues you're going to have with slopes in terrain and things not lining up is going to be a bit more pronounced, so you will probably need to do a bit more work on these edges, and maybe extending them for a bit further than you would if they were sloped and you did the method that we've just done. So yeah, there's a lot of different options, a lot of cool stuff you can do with using the plaster pieces. Obviously I could colour it all, I've put some lights in, so you kind of see at night it looks kind of cool, and it gives that sort of unrealistic, sort of fake pool vibe that you would get in most places. A lot of places don't have an underwater viewing with just a lake. They would have underwater viewing in something that is a bit more artificial. I mean, you could still put mulch in the bottom, or you could line the whole thing in stone if you wanted, or you could try and put some plants, all sorts of stuff to make it look a bit more natural. But yeah, this is just a few ways that you can try and use some artificial looking ponds, some lined ponds in your zoos, and hopefully make them look a bit more realistic, and that sort of thing. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video, my first tutorial video. Hopefully it all makes sense and you are able to get some use out of it. I might try and make some more tutorials if there is anything that people want to see that I've done, and they'd like a bit more explaining on how I do it. I know there's plenty of tutorials of things out there, and I'm sure there's stuff for doing lined pools like this, but I thought since it's been quite a big feature of my videos so far, I would do my own little one since people were interested. So yeah, if you liked it, please leave a like, comment if there's any suggestions of other tutorials you'd like to see, and subscribe if you would like to see my Whipsnade Zoo recreation if you haven't seen that already, which is where I've got a lot of this stuff from. And yeah, I will hopefully see you in some of my future episodes.